Mouthwashing is a psychological horror story which exposes the monstrous aspects of human nature and the issues in which occur when one does not wish to take responsibility. Today, we're going to explore the storytelling aspects of the game and how the masterfully written characters and atmosphere ultimately contribute to Mouthwashing's success. Though, before we begin, if you could subscribe to my channel, that'd be very much appreciated, as I analyze games, movies, and books, and your support allows me to continue to do so. Mouthwashing is a game in which is not linear in the slightest, with a jumping between post and pre-crash. This results in the backstory being slowly unveiled as the story progresses, thus it would be silly for me to approach the story in a standard manner. Instead, I'll speak on the basis of the characters and their outlook on the scenario, as although we play from the perspective of Jimmy, we are able to grasp each character and their motives. Though, before we get into that, let me give you a quick rundown of the events of the story, and yes, with complete spoilers, so if you haven't already played the game, I recommend that you go play it and then come back to this video. A crew consisting of Swansea, Daisuke, Jimmy, Anya, and Curly are tasked with transporting cargo, that being boxes upon boxes of mouthwash, though the crew doesn't figure this out until it's too late and the group are destined to die. Prior to the crash, the group is informed that it is the last trip they will ever make, and with no employment opportunities lined up, the group is down to their last legs. Not only that, but Jimmy, being the disgusting beast he is, committed a horrendous act to Anya, which left her scarred, and Jimmy, being adamant on deferring responsibility due to not only his malicious actions, but his dead-end career. These circumstances result in Jimmy manually forcing a crash, as he has nothing to live for. The crash resulting in Curly being left in a state of ruin with burn marks covering his body, and having to cope with the immeasurable pain, requiring painkillers to be shoved down his throat. With Jimmy taking up the mantle of captaincy, Unity falls to pieces, and each member of a tulpa ends up dying one by one, except for Curly, who has to endure a fate worse than death. Anya dies by locking herself in the medbay after being tormented by her abuser that constantly belittles her. Daisuke dies by climbing for a dangerous vent which pierces him, resulting in a wounded state, to which Swansea kills him to put him out of his misery. Swansea dies with a gunshot to the head, to which Jimmy carries out in order to be able to forego all responsibility. And finally, Jimmy carries Curly to the only working cryopod before killing himself, not facing up to the wrongdoings which he had committed, as if he were to return to Earth he would surely have been arrested, his trauma in which was self-inflicted eating at him until he dies his lonely death. So now that we've covered the basics about the story, let's dig into the characters. How about we start with Curly, the prior captain of a ship and the only survivor of a tragedy. He had an easygoing and lighthearted attitude, but these traits ultimately allowed for Jimmy to defer responsibility, with Curly never holding him accountable, and in turn giving Jimmy free rein to do as he pleases, as even when Anya went to Curly regarding how she had been assaulted, Curly didn't seem to pressure Jimmy all that much to take accountability. But not only that, he allows Jimmy to enter the cabin, which results in a crash, and although carnage ensued well before, we can't disregard the tremendous effect the crash had. Following the crash, Curly is incapacitated, with him having little import in the story, and is instead a visual display of Jimmy's wrongdoings, and how the greater society failed the working class through both a lack of support and an unsafe workplace, with Unity not being nurtured. This is further evident by subtle hints such as the TV ads to the end of the story that display the poor living conditions which result in the perpetual torment of the lower class. At the conclusion of the story, Curly is left in the cryo chamber, to which his future is shrouded in ambiguity. Swansea is a recovering alcoholic and seems to not want to take a knee for anyone, especially Jimmy. Prior to the crash, Swansea acted as the father figure of Daisuke, and although he had a short fuse, he was a caring man. He was also an avid sneakerhead, but that's not all that important. Following the crash, he spirals downward, breaking his sobriety streak by getting drunk off of mouthwash, though he does have one trick up his sleeve. He guards the only functioning cryopod with the intent of leaving it for Daisuke, the youngest of the group, with him having wanted his survival, as he functions as a guardian over Tulpa. Though following Daisuke's death, Swansea attacks Jimmy in a spurt of rage and then is promptly killed. Daisuke is, as previously mentioned, the youngest of a bunch, and he's the least complex character of the lot. He's a pretty relaxed guy who seems happy to be on board with Tulpa. Not only that, but he desires to be of use to his team, as prior to the crash, he was assisting Swansea, but also after the crash, he obeys Jimmy and tries to sneak to the medbay through the vent, which results in his death. So although playful and lighthearted, he gets taken advantage of by those in higher positions of power, which results in his undoing, showing the poor morals possessed by those in charge, and how they will exploit anything they can in order to claim power. Anya is the most gripping character of the crew and one of the best written characters I've seen in a while. She's complex in the sense that her motive prior to the incident was rather unclear, as she is introverted despite the fact that you can see that her character is a reference to that of Shelley Duvall, the elongated eyelashes being a telltale sign. As for prior to the crash, for following her being assaulted, she is in a grey zone, not having been completely destroyed unlike she is following the crash. A mix of grief and everlasting turmoil leads to her death. However, prior to the incident, she was reserved and a calm-spirited person. Anya confides in Curly, however her trust in someone so lenient results in her downfall, with her heartfelt confession ultimately being disregarded, resulting in her being subject to further degradation by the likes of Jimmy. Following the crash, Anya cares for Curly due to her compassionate heart, and as her story progresses, Anya's mental state worsens, with her prior beliefs toppling, with her wanting to give the likes of Jimmy the benefit of the doubt for his horrendous actions. However, she ultimately concludes that her torment is insurmountable, and that one's present actions is the true display of a person's character, which she makes the decision to which she claims to be acting at her best, that decision being to cease to live. Anya is portrayed as more than a victim, striving for justice and using her inquisitive nature to question the flaws in regards to the way society is run and how there is a lack of protection and accountability. Such can be witnessed through her passive comments. For example, when she confesses to Curly about the digital moonlight, she questions why there is a lock on the medbay but not on the bedrooms, this insinuating the little care provided to those on board the Topa, with safety being lacking in regards to interpersonal issues and outright acts of malice which is not acted upon. Anya is multifaceted and one of the best depictions of mankind in stressful situations, especially those of which who lack autonomy, as she encompasses both the troubles and thought processes behind overcoming assault and being discarded by the system. The final character is Jimmy, the most malignant of a bunch. Prior to the crash, he is spiteful, narcissistic, and lacks any sort of emotional awareness, treating all his crew members terribly, with Curly being the only one being complicit with his terrible actions, and he continues to act the same way following the crash. There is absolutely no justification for Jimmy's actions. However, from Jimmy's perspective, one could come to the conclusion that one would act in a manner when facing such confliction, as much like everyone else in the Topa, he is also a victim of the system, with him being laid off at the conclusion of a flight, and he had no control over the matter. Moreover, he would never have wanted to ship crates upon crates of mouthwash, with the safety and life of those upon the Topa seeming inferior to that of a mouthwash, an item which causes the audience to question the priorities of greater society, and whether Jimmy was corrupt from the get-go, or whether he was morphed due to the dystopian society that lies beyond the Topa. Jimmy is able to usurp power over Curly, to which he then tries to mimic the power that governs over him, by disregarding the lives of the crew, evident by Daisuke's death and the maltreatment of Anya, because to him, everyone else is a pawn in his game, and thus he has no intent of taking accountability, nor does he display even a hint of remorse for his behavior. A true fiend, though in his own mind he may think that he is justified, as why should he be responsible when those that have more power than him aren't? This is usually the part where I cover all pros and cons of a story, though in all honesty, the psychological horror was near perfect. It blended the horror-based aspects with that of the internal crisis of each character, especially Jimmy, all without throwing off the pacing and conveying strong morals, with a crucial message, that being to be responsible for your actions and to not be complacent in calling out injustices, as we need to look out for our peers as we would look out for ourselves. So if you haven't already, go check out this game. If we were to give this game one piece of criticism, it would be that it wasn't long enough, though in saying that, you wouldn't want the story to be bloated with unnecessary bulk, which is why this criticism should be taken with a grain of salt. But one more point of actually implementable criticism is that Daisuke, although a good character, is rather trivial in regards to the others, as although he is a keen willing child, the trope to some extent demystifies his character and thus has a little less depth than the rest. Though as for what the story does well, that'd be everything else, and I personally couldn't recommend it enough, which is why I give the story a 9 out of 10. Anyway, that's going to bring this video to a close. If you liked the video, then give it a like, and if you want to check a story that I made, you should read Cutthroat Carnival. It's a horror story, and although it's quite short, I think you'll like it. If you want to give it a try, the link's in the description. And with that, I wish you the best, and I hope you have a good night.